everybody. My name is Andrea Miller. I'm the founding board member and the executive director of Center for Common Ground. And again, I cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight. Next slide, please. The mission of Center for Common Ground is a very, very simple one. We were founded to educate and empower underrepresented voters in voter suppression states to not only engage in elections, but also advocate for their right to vote. Together, we can build a democracy that prioritizes the voices of all people. And my father is from Mississippi, and they have a saying in Mississippi, all means all, y'all. Next slide. Now, postcards. We had a goal of reaching 12 million voters. Our original goal was we wanted to reach 24 million voters. When the candidate changed, a lot of our volunteers went over to the partisan side. So we had to lower our goals and our expectations because we did not have the people we thought we were going to have. So what did happen though was we sent 5 million postcards. We made 2.5 million phone calls, and there were really only 1.6 million text messages because the cost of texting literally doubled once we got started in our texting program. So that was a bit of a shock. Next slide. Gabe, this is you.
All right. Okay, let me spotlight. Okay. So so we've been doing as much analysis. Oh, we got a little mute there. We've been doing as much analysis as we can. Unfortunately, we don't have the turnout data for everyone who voted in the 2024 election. We only have early voting data. But the overall phone outreach numbers are looking good. We made over, I think, 320,000 calls. And as you can see, North Carolina got the most calls. We've done a little bit of analysis on the counties that we have called in North Carolina, just as a kind of an example to show maybe a hint of what our impact may be with these phone calls. But more detailed results are going to keep coming out as we receive more information, more accurate information about how many people voted in the 2024 general. So first, I'm going to talk about that as an example. If we go to the next slide, John. Yeah, so this is right. So we looked at the top 3 states in terms of the number of calls we had made: North Carolina, Georgia, and Virginia. And what we did is we looked at the early voting turnout rate because that is already visible. We have that information. We looked at the Black early voting turnout rate, the aggregate turnout rate in all of the counties that we were a presence in, that we were making calls to. And specifically the counties that we were making calls to, I should clarify. And we averaged the turnout rate. And as we can see in North Carolina, it was 1.2% higher on average than the Black early voting turnout rate for all of the counties that we did not make phone calls into. 1.2% higher. In Georgia, it was 3.4% higher. And in Virginia, it was 0.08% higher. We'll take what we can get. So that's encouraging, and this obviously doesn't isolate. It's not a super detailed statistic because it doesn't isolate the efforts that we did from other organizations, but it is promising to see those results. Where when we were calling around half the counties, sometimes we were calling more than half, sometimes we were calling fewer than half of the population that was represented in those counties, and of those counties, it looks like the ones we were calling did do better in terms of Black early voting turnout. Let's go to the next slide. So here is something that's even more exciting because it's actually more specific information. We do have the information for everyone who voted in Virginia's primary, June primary in 2024. We actually have the results, and we have the results of everyone that we actually had a conversation with, everyone that our volunteers had a conversation with in these phone banks. And we also have tags remaining of all of the voicemails we left. So we were able to actually compare turnout rates specifically against the voters that we called in Virginia during the primary. And as you can see, interestingly, the overall turnout rate, and this is for Black voters across the state, was only 2.68%. You know, this was a primary. This was a very, very low turnout election in general. But of that population, those that we had a live conversation with voted at a rate of 3.61%. That was their turnout rate. That's huge. And voters that we left a voicemail with actually voted at a rate of 4.15%. So what this means is Black voters who received a voicemail from any of our volunteers were 1.6 times more likely to cast a ballot in the primaries than those who did not. And this is really, really encouraging. This is very specific. It's a lot more specific than any information we have right now for the general election, because we can really trace this impact directly to us. We're not making generalizations about counties. We're actually going into the detailed numbers of specifically only the voters we called and then everyone else in that group. So very encouraging. Next slide. Yeah, so in terms of canvassing, we did more than we ever have in the past by far. We knocked on 18,000 doors. And as another little analysis, just to see an example of the impact of our canvassing, we were canvassing in Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia, kind of our top 3 states in terms of calls as well. But in specifically Mecklenburg, we canvassed in 8 separate precincts, and those precincts were determined by the percentage of Black voters who hadn't voted since 2020. So infrequent Black voters was our target, and we ranked the top 16 precincts by those parameters, how infrequent the Black voter population was. We canvassed 8 of those top 16. And what we did is we looked at the turnout rate for early voting, because we do have that information. The early voting turnout rate for those 8 precincts that we did canvass, it was 40.8%. The early voting turnout rate for the other 8 precincts that had a very similar demographic profile was 38.8%. So this is also quite meaningful in terms of looking at the impact of our canvassers. 2% turnout boost is huge. And next slide. Cool. All right. I think that's it for me. So if you have any questions, I'll be able to try and answer in the chat, or you can email me at gabriel@centerforcommonground.org, and I can get more into the methodology. You know, anything concerning the general election is a little more wishy-washy right now because all we have is early voting turnout data. But I'm happy to, provide more details if anyone wants it.
All right, thanks, Gabe. Now, this is the list of states where we did some work. Our primary target states where we ended up doing most of the work: Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina. Toward the end, meaning at the beginning of October, we worked in Florida and Texas, and our Alabama Democracy Center folks were amazing. They started working in July because that was a brand new district. And so their results were wonderful. And then we also work in South Carolina. We have a democracy center. Next slide. Now, we had wins in 2024. And one of the things that I am going to say is that there are two questions that everybody should be asking. Question number one, and everybody is asking that, what went wrong? But the other question that people haven't quite figured out to ask yet is, what did Center for Common Ground get right? We won all of our main offices in Virginia, President, US Senate. We had two open US House seats, and we won both of those seats with entirely different candidates. Virginia was not on anybody's targeted or swing state list. Frankly, we all know nobody gave a damn about Virginia. In North Carolina, North Carolina was on everybody's swing state list. However, North Carolina won. The North Carolina Black Belt was kind of forgotten, with everybody concentrating on Mecklenburg, Wake County, which has Raleigh, Durham, and Greensboro. If nobody cared about Virginia, people were pretending that Alabama didn't exist. And we won an additional congressional district in Alabama. So again, thank you to our Alabama team. You'll be hearing from EC later, and all of our volunteers who believed and supported us in Alabama Congressional District 2. And we did. There's a very small population of Black voters in Arizona. And in Arizona, every vote counted. So we did have a win in Arizona. Next slide. Virginia. All right, now, this is from VPAP, the Virginia Public Access Project, and then I'm saying notes. Yes, those of us in Virginia really cared, but the rest of the country really was not getting excited about Virginia, but we got excited enough about ourselves. So we won the race for president. We also our US Senator Tim Kaine received his seat. And if we go to the next slide, you will see that Virginia has 11 congressional districts. We right now have 6 districts that are Democratic and 5 districts that are Republican. So Virginia did not experience any change. Next slide. These are the early voting results. Basically, 2.2 million people early voted. And here is interesting difference of 2024 versus 2020. Democratic early voting increased percentage-wise from 50.4 to 50.5, even though the actual turnout number went down 266,000. Now, in 2020, remember, Republicans were against early voting. Early voting was election fraud, and it was a cheat. Early voting increased literally from 34.7 to 37.6 in Virginia. But even they had a turnout decrease of 118,000. Everyone who signed up, you will get a copy of these slides so you can literally look at the breakdown of people who early voted in Virginia. Next slide. I'm done. I want to introduce you to our new leader in North Carolina, Mr. Brandon Rivers, and Brandon will be heading up our new Charlotte Democracy Center. So, Brandon, if you want to see these slides, great. If you want to talk and let them see your charming you without the slides, I'm going to leave it up to you.
Hey, look, that sounds perfect. Sounds great. You can keep me on here. Hey, look. Hey, Shakeen, how you doing? But first of all, I want to tell y'all thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about the work that we've done in North Carolina, especially in this critical election season, and also the vision that we have for the future of our democracy here in Charlotte. Of course, this year, North Carolina was the center of one of the most pivotal elections in our history. I'm proud to have been part of that movement. And we work tirelessly to empower communities, protect voters, all the way into 12:06 a.m. on election night at an early voting site. During this election cycle, I was grateful to be part of one of the largest voter mobilization efforts in the entire state through partnerships with community leaders, colleges like John C. Smith, UNC Charlotte, faith-based organization. We register thousands of voters every week, right? Including pledge to votes in Mecklenburg and Greater Mecklenburg County alone. We hosted 40 events each week, including some of my team members that are on this call right now. Just creating places and spaces where people can learn about their rights, engage with candidates, and understand the importance of voting. Probably one of the most impactful initiatives that we held this year were our Buses to the Polls program. In this effort, we collaborated with the Poor People's Campaign. I know Samantha's on the call, the Roof Above, and we provided transportation to hundreds of residents that to get access to these early voting sites. But beyond the numbers and the logistics, honestly, the work is really about the people. My goal for the Charlotte Democracy Center is to make sure that we're transformative and not transactional. The most important thing about this election was speaking to single mothers who brought their children to early voting sites, right? Speaking to people about the civic engagement, letting people understand that voting is every single year, right? It's not just a presidential election year, right? It's every 4 years. I've been grateful to be able to organize every year for local elections, midterm elections. But a lot of people don't know what these local officials do. They don't know that the sheriff is an elected official. They don't know what the district attorney is an elected official. But beyond that, my goal is to make sure that we have a hub, where local community leaders and local community participants can engage in protecting our democracy in our region and building a foundation that's very important. Lastly, I like to go through it. I like to talk. But lastly, honestly, the biggest thing also, again, I want an organization of the Democracy Center to represent education and advocacy. A place where people can learn about, wealth empowerment, right? Learn about things that bury them, like educational systematic barriers. Understand that minimum wage is a state law, right? The minimum wage in North Carolina is $7.25. Understanding that gentrification in Charlotte is very important. A lot of our people of color can't even afford to live in the state of North Carolina, let alone in the city of Charlotte. Childcare is very expensive. My vision for the Charlotte Democracy Center is a lot more transformative than transactional. And I pray to God that the people on this call will continue to join me and we continue to rock and roll. So that's pretty much it for me. That's pretty much it for me. I ain't gonna go no further. But let's rock and roll.
Hey, thank you, Brandon. And Brandon and all of our other Democracy Center leaders. I'll be talking about it, just a tiny little hint. Um, we will be rolling out a new program, Community Financial Investment Academy, looking at what are the barriers that are keeping poor people poor. I heard from a young woman in Richmond where I was literally almost knocked off my chair that if you are working and have a job, it costs $2,000 a month to live in the projects. Who knew? All right, let's advance the slides. So let's move on through the North Carolina slides again. We work in CD1 and there's all that information about Congressional District 1. I am going to shout out Shakina. I saw you on this call. She was one of our Congressional District 1 canvassers. Brandon was able to recruit canvassers to work in that rural areas of North Carolina. Center for Common Ground, we won in rural areas where literally when we look across the states, we lost big in rural areas, especially rural Black areas. All right, I'm going to bring up somebody that you know from many other calls, Mr. Ray McClendon, Political Action Chair of Communities United for Justice in Georgia. We have worked with Ray and his team since 2020 when they were originally the NAACP, and they have now formed their own organization. Ray is going to talk to you about what happened in Georgia. Georgia was another one of those states that was a swing state. However, what many people assumed was going to happen in Georgia, that's not exactly what happened. Ray, take it away.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and good evening to everybody and all of the fellow workers we have in the vineyard. You know, we're still going strong. We did not get all of the results that we wanted, but there's some fundamental reasons why we should be optimistic and some challenges that we know we've got to overcome, and we need some new strategies for overcoming them. So first of all, let me talk a little bit about what we saw happening here in Georgia from the opposition, and that is that we had known that from Bannon and MAGA that they had committed to being more involved in local election boards and school boards and so forth, and have what Bannon called a precinct strategy. What we were able to learn post-election was not only did they have that as a strategy, they invested heavily over the last 4 years in a grassroots strategy similar to the one that Andrea and our organization and others have been employing successfully in Georgia, which is to get out in the communities through things like democracy centers, and other activities that we have to connect directly with people. So we found out that the MAGA competitive side of this put actually $3 to $3.5 million a year into turning out low propensity, low information voters to get them to come out and early vote, which was totally opposite of the strategy that they had in 2020. So over a period of 4 years, they spent almost $13.5 million on 85 full-time staffers, and they galvanized 15,000 volunteers across the state of Georgia. Now you compare, you look at that, and that was totally different and separate and apart from all of the media that they had going on. And one of the aggressive media strategies that they have had that we've seen employed in Georgia and elsewhere is that the attacks in the mainstream media created a whataboutism game plan, as well as making the media feel like they had to give equal time to some of the most extraordinary and far right positions that would come forward. We believe that this all had an impact, is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't trust the mainstream media anymore. And at the same time, nobody was attacking a lot of the most egregious views that were being shared in right-wing media. So when you combine the direct outreach to low propensity voters with a consistent information strategy over a 4-year period, we saw that the gains that we had made over the last 4 years from 20 to 20 were reversed, not overwhelmingly, but by 2 to 3 percentage points in many areas outside of the metro Atlanta area. So what does that mean? We won with turnout in 2020. That led to victory because we had great voter turnout within the Black community, and of course everyone knows about the great turnout we had for the runoff elections for the 2 Senate races that got us a Black senator and a Jewish senator on the January 5th, 2021 runoff. The turnout lagged in 2024. We saw nationally numbers where for the first time in 12 years that white voter turnout nationally rose. It had been on a steady decline down to 67% nationally in as a percentage of the total vote in 2020, and was back up to 71% in 2024. We had a similar pattern in Georgia where black voter turnout declined by 1 percentage point to a little under 27% in 2024, where it had been over 28, almost 29% in 2020. So when you combine an increase in the white vote and a decrease in the Black vote, you can see how those numbers flipped over from what the election results had been in 2024. Now, we want to talk about some of the contributing factors to that, and I've alluded to some of them already. If you would go to the next slide. The key, some of the key challenges that we saw were, number one, misinformation, disinformation impact in the Black community was much more significant than reported. We were running into this in canvassing, in our barbershop talks, doing community outreach. We found that the amount of disinformation that was coming into the community and the belief in some of this information, although it seemed unreal to those of us who are in this day to day, was being picked up by low propensity, what I would call low information or casual civic engagement participants. And this had a much more profound impact than we had anticipated. Gerrymandering decreased the number of competitive races. When we didn't have any high-profile statewide races that were significant, the congressional races become more important to driving turnout. As some of you will recall, Georgia won. We won a case that was supposed to create an additional Black district. Because of gerrymandering, what the state legislature, which has a supermajority Republicans, what they were able to do was to simply reconstruct a new district and made it Black, and the old district that had a Black congressperson was reconfigured so that it would become Republican. Also, over this last redistricting, they were able to push more Black people into the current districts where Blacks were the congresspeople. So what that did, instead of us having a net increase of one new district, they remained the same. So although we won the court case and we should have had an additional district, it ended up being a wash and we were unsuccessful in getting that overturned. In fact, the U.S. Attorney's Office agreed with the redistricting strategy that the state legislature employed. So that was a negative. Voter suppression, we've talked about since 2021. It's real. It's been institutionalized in Georgia and weaponized. There were more voter purges. There are broad voter purges. They tweak the law in Georgia every year. They add new components every year. And one of the biggest changes many of you have heard about is the changes to the state election board, where that was a constant process of coming up with new rules that potentially could impact voting locations, voting time frames, et cetera. So all of those things were destabilizing factors in the community. And then investments in grassroots organizations were woefully late and inadequate. You know, many of us who are involved in this work commit a lot of time on a volunteer basis to this work in anticipation that the major donors will come in to fund the campaign, the grassroots campaigns, sometime late summer. We ended up with many of our organizations, which we have a collaboration of over 20 different organizations across the state, many of whom only got funding a week to a week and a half before the election. Now, again, you compare that to what we talked about just a minute ago with our competition was fully funded, well funded over 4 years compared to many of the grassroots organizations that we have that were only funded for less than a month. Next slide, please. So what do we need to do going forward? I believe that what we've got to do is make sure that we've got year-round civic engagement. And that's why I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation and to have a partner, to be in partnership with the Center for Common Ground, which is focused on year-round engagement. And we're looking at strategies for doing that and funding that. We're going to continue to focus on state and local issues. There's a lot going on because of the new administration, but we're going to focus on our communities and deal with the pain points and issues that affect them locally. And that way we will rebuild the trust and the ground game that we need in order to be prepared for runs in municipal elections in 2025, and then midterms and a big Senate race that we have in 2026. Of course, that includes highlighting community benefits, personal benefits, and how the state and local governments impact direct community benefits. And again, we're going to work closely with Andrea and the Center for Common Ground team on strengthening democracy centers across the state of Georgia. You know, we believe in taking good ideas and working on them and expanding them, not reinventing the wheel. The democracy center strategy is a great strategy, and we want to help to push that forward because it encompasses many of the components of what we think is needed in order to move into a stronger position for 25 and 26. So that's what we intend to do. That's it.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Our next speaker fought an amazing fight in October of 2023. Our partners at Alabama Forward won a lawsuit granting Alabama an additional majority congressional district. And EC, Doug, and the whole Alabama team realized the 1% of political partners understood, yes, people are going to be in a new district. So they started in June planning to get out in the street and let voters know you are now in a new congressional district. You now have an opportunity to elect someone who will represent your ideas. And that is exactly what they did. So, EC, the floor is yours. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and good evening to everyone. Yes, we're all very excited about what we were able to accomplish here in Alabama. It was no easy feat. And yes, we actually started on the ground in June, but we actually started our planning over a year before, back in 2023. Because at that time we realized that even though the district court had come up with 3 plans for this new congressional district, this congressional district 2, that it was only that third plan which only allowed 48.7% of a majority minority district to be enforced. And the reason for that, we understood, was because of the Alabama's Constitution. That was the only plan that could be defended in court and not be overturned. But that meant that we were going to have to work drastically hard. And because of this, one thing about Alabama's Democracy Centers is a network. In other words, we have centers in Huntsville, Selma, and Mobile. Mobile was the area for Congressional District 2. However, our Selma Democracy Center was the center that had Congressional District 7, in which we have current and returning Congressional Congresswoman Terry Sewell. But because of how the redistricting was done, her district was reduced significantly. So whereas in the past she was somewhere between 58, 59% minority district, it dropped down to 52. So we knew we were going to have to do some work there too, but our main concern was Congressional District 2. And the reason for that is because of the fact that it had drawn national attention for the mere fact that it set the stages for Louisiana, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina as far as their redistricting is concerned. So our point was that if we did not do our work in Alabama, then we could cancel any type of effort that was going to come forward. So we were able, as I stated, back in 2023 to start planning how we would all work together. And that was the most significant part. We were able to pull together about 24 different organizations in the state of Alabama, primarily, as Andrea stated, our partnership with Alabama Forward, but then also we were able to pull together our collaboration with the League of Women Voters, Black Voters Matter, the different Divine Nine groups, which are our African American, our Black fraternities and sororities in the state, along with other organizations such as Alabama Links and different grassroots organizations across the state. And our primary interest was to make sure that we got the vote out in Congressional District 2. Congressional District 2 consisted of 13 counties. Some of them rule, well, I should say most of them rule, but a few were also urban, such as Montgomery and also Mobile. So we knew that through our efforts, along with the NAACP, they were very informative and very involved. But we knew that through our efforts, it was going to take a collective effort to really get everyone out to vote. So we were working, as I stated before, we even knew who the candidates were, because our goal and our emphasis was this: we're nonpartisan, but we're also non-stupid. So we also had to work to make sure that everyone understood that this race was about the seat and not necessarily a candidate. On the Democratic side, there were actually 13 candidates running for this one particular seat. And the Republicans weren't far behind because they had 8. So we knew that it was going to be our effort to make sure that folks understood the importance of this seat. And that's what we did. To the extent that even before the primary in March, the Center for Common Ground allowed us to provide 95,000 text messages to Black folks in Montgomery and Mobile to make sure that they understood, because in this redistricting, it also changed voting poll and precincts across that area. So there were some folks who had no knowledge about where they would be voting, who had voted in different districts before. Also, folks that were in District 1 were now in District 2. And a lot of folks, again, had no knowledge about that. So these 95,000 text messages allowed them to be informed and also provided them with information as far as where they need to go vote. We also got the utilization of a special tool that came out last year, well, actually in 2022, called ActiVote. And it allowed us to provide our folks information about the total voting capacity from the presidential race all the way down to races in their particular districts. But this allowed us all to begin working for that particular seat. We did not know who the candidate would be until April 26th of 2024, after the runoff was held with the 2 candidates from each of the 2 parties. Once we got the candidate, we began working as far as on the ground. We first started with our canvassing efforts, which were done all over that district. We received a lot of support, as I stated, from the information we were able to attain from Center for Common Ground, but we also had a lot of information coming from our partner, Alabama Forward. And through that collaboration, we were able to really get our folks, our Black folks, informed about what was happening, who the candidates were, but primarily what the policies and platforms would be for each of the 2. And as I stated, we did not work for a particular candidate, but we made sure that our folks understood what the different candidates' policies and platforms were. So that effort continued. We had a collective effort as far as postcarding is concerning from our partnership with Alabama Forward and the League of Women Voters of Alabama. They concentrated, the League of Women Voters, along with the Divine Nine membership, concentrated on the rural areas in that 13 congressional districts, providing postcards to our Black constituents there. And then the Center for Common Ground concentrated on the urban areas. So no one was working overstepping anyone. We were all working together, and no one was in any type of a silo working alone. And on the screen is just a brief overlook of what we were able to obtain at this early stage of the outcome of our efforts. So we're extremely pleased as to what occurred. Now, let me also emphasize that once the candidates changed as far as from the presidential race, that also increased the numbers of interest as far as our young folks were concerned. So because of that, we were able to go on all of the HBCUs, historically Black colleges and university campuses, doing their homecoming and provide the student population with information. And throughout the state, we increased the voting registration between August and September for, I think that number to this point was over 10,000 African Americans who registered to vote who were on campuses. One thing you have to understand about the state of Alabama, it allows even out-of-state students to vote as long as they spent one night in their location. So that allowed us to register college students not depending upon them actually being residents of the state, but depending upon them being a college student in the state of Alabama. All of that helped us to be able to pull out this surprising win to a lot of people. We were able to, the candidate that won, Mr. Shamari Figures, was an excellent candidate. He has a history. His parents were both civil rights leaders. In fact, his mom is now a state senator for the state of Alabama in the Mobile district. He was a graduate of both undergraduate and law school at the University of Alabama. And through his candidacy and through the efforts of our 24 collaborative groups, he won by 54% over a mega candidate from the other party. So we were just completely happy with the outcome. We're still a little excited about what has happened, because what it did, it provided us with a blueprint from how we can go forward. And we will be sharing that information, especially here in the South, because what has always been confusing, Ray and I and Andrea, along with other partners, have talked about this forever. But the idea that the South is not a battleground has been one of the misomens that has been stated for years. The reason why the South states are not battlegrounds is not because of numbers, it's because of non-voting. And the reason why there's limited voting is because of all of the policies and procedures that come out of Washington never reach the grassroots. So our efforts is to make sure that our grassroots do as much as we can to educate our folks about civic education and literacy, and make sure that they understand how important their vote is. We will be concentrating as we go forward into the 25 election, which will be majority municipal elections across the state. But we have a very important race coming up in 2026, in which we will be electing a new governor. Our current governor has term limits out. And then also we have a senatorial race. And then, of course, all of the congressional races. Now, I know I talked a lot about Congressional District 2. We did not overlook Congressional District 7, but because of our Democracy Center in Selma, they were very confident that what they had done, and this being a returning congressional representative, that we could concentrate more of our efforts in Congressional District 2. But the state of Alabama has, for the first time in its history, elected 2 African Americans to be United States congressional representatives for the state. Our goal in 2026 is to increase that number by 2, to change our congressional representation for Congressional District 5 and also Congressional District 3, and maintaining Congressional District 2 and Congressional District 7. So we thank you for all of your support, but it has not stopped now. We're going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, EC. All right, we are in 2025. What are we planning to do and when? So this is our work plan. In 2025, the great state of Wisconsin has another Supreme Court race. Center for Common Ground, we were part of that race in 2023, and Justice Janet Protasiewicz actually won that seat. So there is going to be an election on April 1, and that will be the general election. Right now, there are only 2 candidates running. So it really does look as though there will probably not be a primary in Wisconsin. We do have a person on the ground, and we are also working with former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. and his Forward Together Wisconsin organization. In Virginia, Virginia has primary elections in June. In 2025, Virginia has our statewide elections for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and all 100 seats in our House of Delegates. There will be no Senate races in Virginia in 2025 because the entire General Assembly, all 100 House seats, all 40 Senate seats were up for election in 2023 because our redistricting was done so late. So there will be no Senate races in November of 2025, but the entire House will be up. Currently, we have an idea who is running for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. The House races have not fully shaped up yet. And yes, Virginia has one vote Democratic lead in the Senate and a one vote Democratic lead in the House. And then there are going to be Georgia municipal elections. Brandon will work with us on what will we do with the North Carolina municipal elections. So 2025, we've got Virginia as the big marquee race. And then we will have these smaller elections where hopefully these are very local. The results of these elections impact people's lives daily. Next slide. Now, the Virginia primary. Right now, it looks like there will not be a primary between the governor candidates. The election will be historic because right now we have Abigail Spanberger, my congresswoman, who is running for governor, and we have Winston Sears, who is the current lieutenant governor, who is running for governor. Currently, our Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, has literally prevented anyone else from getting in that race on the Republican side. He wants that race to be 2 women. And what he's looking at is if he can manage to sell his candidate, he will technically be able to have a second term. In Virginia, governors are limited to a single term and they cannot succeed themselves. So he's got a little plan, plot, and scheme, put a totally unqualified candidate up there, and then he gets the second term through her. There will be a race for lieutenant governor, and there will be a race for attorney general. Right now, there will not be a primary on the Republican side. It will only be a primary on the Democratic side because that is where we have multiple candidates. Next slide. Now, one of the other things that we are going to be doing, again, in looking at all of the seats that the couch won, where people just stayed home, doesn't matter who I vote for, my life never changes. As I said earlier, I was absolutely shocked and amazed to discover that if you have a decent job, it costs $2,000 a month to live in the projects. So one of the things that we will be offering will be the Community Financial Investment Academy. We will start with our Democracy Center leaders and some other partners. EC, I'm going to be calling you to talk to them and form this round table about what we need to prepare low income communities for investment. And when that investment comes, it elevates their community. They remain in that community as opposed to when investment comes in the community, generally in the form of gentrification, they get shoved out. So the previous strategy of warehousing people has produced no wealth communities, not just low wealth, no wealth. Banks, grocery stores, and services have long left the community, and what they've been replaced with have been predominantly, I call them leech services that come into the community, all the money goes outside. We want to break that cycle, helping people with financial literacy. What is a real bank? A real bank does not charge you 10% to cash a check. And what does it take to purchase a home? What is a mortgage? How do all these things work? For people who have been trapped in this cycle for decades, and this is all they've known, what is normal to us is foreign to people who live in poverty. So we will be convening this round table with our leaders. We will be working to identify projects. We will then be helping to train people to write the proposals to get their projects funded. And we will be bringing one of the funders with us to most of these meetings. Next slide. I want to introduce Janice Gay. Janice Gay heads up our Virginia Beach Democracy Center. Some of you may know her as the phone bank team leader. And Janice came up with an improvement to our Democracy Center concept. The Democracy Centers are normally citywide or countywide, and what we discovered in this election is there are pockets, literally inside cities and counties, where all the low income people have been clustered. And these are the folks where they don't get the good news. They really don't get any news. And so she came up with a concept called democracy hubs. So, Janice, take this away.
Hello, everyone. Yes, it's community democracy hubs. This whole concept of community hubs is just building communities within a community. Most of the time when we were canvassing in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake and Suffolk, a lot of the voters and the residents, they were conflicted. Some wanted to vote, some didn't vote, some had reasons why they chose not to. Some didn't have any reasons. They just went with the majority. And so establishing this community democracy hub will build open communication within the community leaders. The first thing we want to do is to establish a needs assessment, because when you go into low income areas, and I know because I grew up in one, first of all, you have to build trust. They have to know you. And so if you are within that community, then we have a common interest. We have a common issues. We have common problems. So we can share those things on an assessment. We can, evaluate people on assessment, and then we can talk about shared values and visions. What is it that you want to see that change? What do you want to see different? What do you want to see happen? Having those conversations within those community hubs will make a difference. Also creating a plan that they will become their own creators of their plan or their model for community hubs. It'll be led by them, influenced by them, mapped out by them, and they would learn to build relationships, build trust with one another, and then we can also include different workshops and interventions, give a whole lot of civic engagement, and just incorporate a whole lot of training, which we definitely need. I came up with something that said intentional process. We have to have an approach when we come out to these areas. We got to create spaces that they feel comfortable in. Maybe their community center, multi-purpose center, libraries, somewhere within their community. And then person and community spaces, again, a gathering place where they feel comfortable, feel like they can talk to one another, feel able to trust you when you come in to talk to them. Have a model. Their model would be, what are your expectations? What are you looking to change? What do you want to see happen different in this community? Because a lot of the people that's in the community, they're in like a survival mode. I know because that's where I was. It was such a survival mode that even though there was greater or better on the outside of this community, I couldn't see past it. And so there had to be education. So civic engagement and just educational points, maybe budgeting, maybe showing them how to plan or do even making a grocery list, simple things to meet their needs. And then when you have their needs met, they're more prone to listen to you. Collaborative partnerships with other organizations and community leaders that's already doing the work. Let's collaborate with them. Boots on the ground, all hands on deck. And then collaborative community governance. Let them be able to be a part of what they're building. And it gives them that individual trust, but it also gives them ownership. Next slide.
Oops. Um, it may have eaten the other slide that I did for you, Janice. It ate
Okay.
that. So
I definitely have a little bit. One of the things I wanted to say is we came up with these community hubs. Why we came up with them? Because we need to connect with our people. And what I mean by our people is people who don't understand what we're all talking about. Before I came to Center for Common Ground, I would have never even thought about voting, didn't care much about it at all. Like a lot of the people that I go and knock on doors and make phone calls to. But being a part of this family, I call it a family, a community of people who want to educate you on what we're dealing with every day, being able to listen, being able to learn. This enabled me to want to learn more, then become a part of it. And now I'm a part of the team, but it has to start somewhere. So that's my why, to connect, to influence, change, and to create a place where people can build their own, operate together as a unit. And then how do we do this? Again, needs assessment, define shared values and visions, and then creating a plan and executing the plan. Thank you.
all right. Thank you, Janice. Thank you so very, 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 very much. We are now joined by our board member, Katie Hornung. And this is an activity that you can do right now. And I'm going to give you some of the history literally in less than 2 minutes. Now, I've worked on the Equal Rights Amendment since 1968, and this is where we are now. In order to ratify a constitutional amendment, 38 states are required. The Equal Rights Amendment was passed and signed by Congress in 1972. And they put a deadline in the preamble. Think of it as it was on the cover page. They put a deadline of 7 years. And then they did a 3-year extension. So introduced in 1972, and by 1980, 35 states had ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. 38 states were needed. Now, constitutional scholars looked at the deadline and they said there are no deadlines in Article 5, which explains how you amend the constitutions. It doesn't have deadlines and it doesn't have backseas. In other words, once you ratify, you can't unratify. The state of Nevada ratified in 2017, and the archivist, the person or office responsible for adding states as officially having ratified a constitutional amendment, added Nevada. In 2018, Illinois ratified. They added Illinois. Virginia ratified in 2020. And President Trump intervened through his Office of Legal Counsel and said, don't publish Virginia. Now, according to the American Bar Association, they sent in a unanimous opinion. And when do a group of attorneys ever all agree on anything? And their opinion was all criteria for publication of the Equal Rights Amendment as the 28th Amendment have been met. The archivist simply needs to publish. So we are looking at, since President A told the archivist, don't publish, fine, President B will tell the archivist to publish. Now, currently, there is a sort of second, but not really thing that people are trying to do. I worked on removing the deadline from 2011 to 2019. And right now, there are 250 co-sponsors on the House Bill HJ Res 25, and there are 53 co-sponsors on SJ Res 4 to remove the deadline. Now, there is no path to pass the ERA out of the 118th US House. There are not 3 Republicans who will sign a discharge petition. There is no path to the floor to have a vote. That's what it's called, a path to the floor. You can get around that by having 218 members sign a discharge petition. Well, there's 215 Democrats, and you're not getting any of the Republicans. Also, in order to get it through the Senate, you need 60 votes. We have 53. So it's not going through the Senate. You need 60 votes to bypass the filibuster. So what we generally explain to people is we have a path that we can take and push it forward now. Or we can sit and wait. We know we're not getting anywhere in the 119th Congress, maybe the 120th, maybe the 145th, or we don't know. But the opportunity to do this and finish this job is right now. So, Katie, hopefully I have explained this very, very well so that people understand. Go ahead and talk about the actions that are coming up. Right now, you can do them tonight.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention to this important civil rights issue tonight. We have been in DC since about a week after the election to build pressure on President Biden. Our job is to make sure that if we're not going to win this, we're going to go down fighting. That's kind of where we're at. So we are trying to build a very large noise around the country for publication of the Equal Rights Amendment. Many people don't realize that our Constitution doesn't already cover gender. So that is in and of itself a wonderful education moment. But we are focused on building that pressure, and building that pressure is spreading the word. So we're spreading the word in a number of ways. And I know some of you have received notes from your postcard leaders. I know that out in California, they've been pushing this. I know that Roxanne Rucker has also pushed this out. If you go to our website, voteequality.us, and there's a Take Action Now menu, and there are lots of things that you can do. Some of them are remote, some of them are in DC. On Tuesday, it will be 101 years to the day of when the Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced to Congress. And I think the key thing to think about there is that means we are over a century of women trying to add gender equality into the Constitution. It's especially important right now because we have 170 million women and girls, plus we have our LGBTQ plus community that is not being protected, and that things are getting a little bit more scary out. And I think especially with Project 2025, a lot of people are very concerned about that. So this is kind of a last Hail Mary before Biden leaves. And I will address, I saw one of the questions pop through in the chat about why we think things are happening. But I first want to tell you about a couple of the things. Postcard strategy. Oh, sorry. Our postcard strategy is essentially that we want people to tell other people first and then send a note to Biden. It is important to spread the word. It's almost more important to spread the word and to make a great big noise about this than it is to send that, like, you send a postcard to Biden, but send lots and lots and lots of cards to other people as well. This is the same strategy that we did in Virginia, and it worked beautifully for spreading the word and getting ordinary citizens to the table to talk about this issue. So that's one big step. Another step that we're doing next Tuesday is on that 101 year anniversary, we're going to do a thing that we call Relay for Rights, and we're going to pass a copy of the Constitution 6.5 blocks down Constitution Avenue from the south spot of the White House down to the archives, because that is how close we are. We are 6.5 blocks away. So this is an easy step that Biden could do, and there's really not a great reason for him not to do this. So we will physically demonstrate it. We'll make a big joyful ruckus. You know us, we love to do the joyful ruckus. But we also really want to make a point here that this is important and needs to get done. And without this, we're really going into a next administration very unprotected. So then the other things that you can do are you can write a letter to the editor, you can write notes to other people, and we will be showing a screening of Ratified. We're going to go for a big nationwide screening on December 23rd and have Andrea join us for a panel after that. And then we have a big fun action that we're working towards for kind of a viral content moment, that, you know, how the kids love to do those things. We're working on a viral challenge for December 28th for the 28th Amendment. So those are kind of the next few things in the pipeline. And we hope that if we keep making this noise, I do think the USA Today op-ed was helpful, and we just need to keep it up. So, and
right.
Andrea, I don't know how much of these questions you want me to do, or if you want to do them.
Go ahead and grab the two that are the one that is there, the Supreme Court.
Okay. So a lot of the conversation right now is that there are some people that do not want to have this published. They're worried about the Supreme Court doing something to it. I would say that I've been working in this space for a number of years, and the people who are giving that excuse today are the same people that were never supportive of Virginia's ratification and the 3-state strategy. That's just my take on it. So I feel like it's just another hurdle, it's another roadblock, it's another excuse. And if you really sit and think about it, every single amendment has to go to the Supreme Court so that we can find out what it means. That's just how the amendments work. They get sorted over a 20 to 50 year period. So the current Supreme Court will not be the only Supreme Court to weigh in on this amendment. This should be weighed in over many, many years. And any noise that we are building today in support of this amendment is the same noise that will be supportive of it and protective of it. Where hopefully nobody feels like they should be taking it down and taking gender equality out of the Constitution. I feel like that is a very hard thing for somebody to excuse. So we really think that our job is to spread the word and have everybody. This poll's super high. I think in Virginia it was above 80%. It had really strong polling in both parties and in, you know, alternate parties as well. And so it's important, if we build that momentum, if we build that noise, and if we protect it, the way we protect it is with the masses. If you watch what's happening over in other countries, you have a leader who steps a little too far and the masses show up to say, no, you don't get to do that anymore. And so I'm really hopeful that we can build this into a huge, huge nationwide call for action for Biden to publish it, and that it will make Trump think twice about unpublishing.
All right, and then Katie, there's a question, where can people find the movie Ratified?
Yeah, so on our website, there is under the Take Action menu, there's a link called Other, and on there are a couple of, we have 2 screenings coming up in DC, and then we have 3 virtual screenings coming up, and that it's a free screening, and all you have to do is follow the instructions and join us.
All right, great. And we've got the vote equality website link in the chat. Thank you, Katie, Center for Common Ground team. Questions that haven't been answered in the chat regarding what we are doing in 2025 and or what happened in 2024.
Let's see here.
I mean, this is an amazing chat that we've got going.
This is,
here.
I know, I really appreciate everyone's passion around this, and I appreciate especially the comments like publish or perish. It does feel a little bit like that right now. Yeah, so as far as Biden's rationale for not ordering it, the Trump administration put forward a memo from their Office of Legal Counsel that said, oh, no, do not publish this, deadline. Biden's OLC put forward a memo that said, well, Trump's memo was pretty much wrong, but we think Congress needs to weigh in on this. And so what it really is one president pointing at 535 other people, which means he's pointing at it not being done. So at the end of the day, the reality is you have to build pressure on a single point of pressure versus 535 points of pressure. And many of the legal scholars have said, nope, the Congress doesn't need to do anything. Article 5 does not leave a step for Congress after an amendment has been fully ratified. And in fact, our 27th Amendment took over 200 years to ratify and was added. And after it was added to the Constitution, that's when Congress had a resolution that said we acknowledge the 27th Amendment. So personally, I'd like to see publication first and then a congressional reaction of, yes, okay, we see that it's there.
All right. Now, CFCG, do we have other questions that I need to answer? No, take that off the screen. That's no, we don't need that. And we don't need that one either. So we can, close the presentation. And are there questions? I see one. How do we account for the fact that greater Black turnout may not favor Democrats? As I said, the couch won in this election. The Black turnout was lower than it had been in 2020. So Black voters did not vote for Trump. You do have to understand that there are a certain percentage of Black voters that are Republican, and they are going to vote for Republicans. But when we look at the overall Black voters in Georgia, roughly 93% of Black voters are going to vote Democratic. The smallest or the largest percentage of Republican voters, Black Republican voters, are in Virginia. 15% of Black voters in Virginia are Republican. That means 85% are not. So are you going to worry about 15 and not try to turn out the 85? That's a great question, by the way. All right. Are there any other questions for me to answer? I mean, this is an amazing chat. And then thank you, Mayor Roberts, for answering. Do you think that the hurricane impacted voting in Western North Carolina, and turnout in Western North Carolina was actually higher than the state average? So people really did show up to vote. All right. Yep. We've got people that are going to work together. I'm loving that. People are hooking up in the chat. This is perfect. Um, there's the question of what do you do with year-round organizing? Well, again, we're going to be adding financial literacy. Some of our democracy centers teach civics. Almost all of our democracy centers do some level of food distribution. We have one democracy center that is a food bank. We have a second democracy center that is a feeding location, and they are open 360 days out of the year. This same democracy center is now building houses for people who are formerly homeless. So again, what is it that the community needs? What will make the community better? And so we really work on that. Yes. And again, one of the big issues was that the Trump campaign kept telling people, oh, Black voters are going to vote for Trump. And that had a major impact on the number of volunteers that we had. So our original goal had been outreach to 24 million voters, because we did outreach to 18 million voters in 2020 with less volunteers. So because our volunteer population dropped off, there were less people. Now, because we are at the end, some really interesting and true information. We presented a proposal to the DNC for turning out the Black vote, and we were looking at Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. And we turned the proposal in October of 2023. And then we kept revising it, and the numbers kept getting lower. Oh, Florida was also in there. And when we finally got someone from the DNC to talk to us about, did you get the proposal? Did you read it? What did you think? They said, we got your proposal. We absolutely loved it. And we're going to use it to turn out Republicans. We were like, what? They're like, oh yeah, we think a lot of Republicans are going to cross over and vote for Democrats. Well, how'd that work out for you? So one of the big things that we are talking about, and why our democracy centers are important, and why we are going to start creating democracy hubs, is we have been telling people since 2016 that the Black community, I don't know about the Hispanic community, but I do know the Black community is very frustrated. There is no respect for what they want, they need, or their thoughts. People come into their community and want to tell them, oh, this is what you want, whether this is what they want or not. And people have just started tuning out, and they've stopped voting. So that is my comment when I say the couch won. What we are doing is engaging people in communities who have really given up, because nobody bothers to come and talk to us ever about anything, or people show up only at election time, and after the election they are gone so fast, couldn't even get the license plate of the car, it was heading out of town so fast. We hire local people who live in the community, who are known by the community, to do the canvassing. Janice has built an amazing phone banking team right there in Virginia Beach, Norfolk, with young people who live in that area. There is a tremendous amount of pride that we get from some of the older Black voters, because they realize they're talking to a young person, and oh, and you're involved in this election stuff. So we want to keep working on that. And that's going to be very important, because we believe a big success in Virginia, hopefully will make people who have never really paid attention to what we do pay attention. Yeah. All right. I mean, is this possible? Well, it is 9 o'clock. It is almost 9 o'clock. I want to thank all of my guests, and there were so many. Ray, any closing remarks you want to make?
No, I agree with what you just said, and looking forward to working in even greater collaboration in 2025.
All right. I cannot wait. Everybody, thank you all so very much for joining us, for staying with us. Go out, write postcards. If you're in the area, join Katie in DC. This is going to be a wild ride coming up in 2025, but I think we can keep on winning, teach other people to do things the way we've done it, and have a fantastic 25 and really be on the upswing moving into 26. So again, thank you all. Good night, everybody.